Okay, y'all. So I wanted to come up here and thank you guys for thank y'all for the condolences about my grandmother. I really appreciate it. It's been a very difficult time for me. I haven't been ignoring y'all. I've been seeing everything. I really appreciate it. I really wanted to take this time out to come on here to thank you guys for the support, as well as I'm going to kind of tell you what happened with my grandmother and how serious COVID really is. If you guys don't think it's serious, it's serious. My mom works in the medical field just like me. She kept my grandmother in the house safe. My grandmother didn't go anywhere. My mom would take her out to the store maybe once a month. We were just really protecting her because we knew if she got COVID, so we still don't know where it came from. My grandmother went over to my mother's house for Christmas. My mom took her right back home. She wasn't even over there long. My grandmother had a fall a couple of days after Christmas and ended up being admitted into the hospital so they could observe her. And then that turned into her testing positive for COVID and being treated. I'm not going to say she was being treated for COVID because she didn't have any symptoms. My grandma she was good. She didn't need no oxygen, like she was thriving. And so they decided to send her to a rehab facility for, to help her, to rehabilitate her, teach her how to walk and, so she wouldn't have another fall. So my grandma wasn't at the rehab facility for no more than a day, not even a whole 24 hours. They rushed her to the emergency room because her oxygen levels had dropped. I spoke to my grandma that night and she sounded short-winded. They had her in a room with somebody. If that person had if that person had COVID, I will never know. My grandmother was never one to ask questions. They did have her in a room before she got transferred to the hospital. They did have her in another room with a COVID patient, which is weird to me because I guess the states do it differently. I know in North Carolina they don't put two COVID positive patients in the same room. Everybody has their own room. And on top of that, these rooms are negative air pressure rooms. So yeah. But anyways, so her levels dropped. But when I got that phone call, my mommy was crying and she scared me. And the first thing that came to my mind was, mommy, is she alert and oriented? Is she alert and oriented? She was alert enough to give them my mother's phone number and to give them my information. So I knew that my grandma was okay. So my grandma was stable. She had to go to ICU. And it was rough not being able to talk to her because I talk to my grandma every day, all day, every day. It doesn't matter what time it is. So it was rough. So I was like, mommy, you need to give grandma her phone. You need to take grandma her phone. She need her phone. She need her phone. Because I just did not like not being able to talk to my grandmother. So finally my grandmother got her phone. And she got really well. They was getting her up out of bed, putting her in a chair. She was right back talking about she needed her comb. She wanted her hair washed. Like, she was being her sassy self. So she went ahead and got transferred to another COVID floor, but she had her own room this time. She was on the BiPAP machine for a while at 100%, and then she was able to be on high flow oxygen. She still was at 100%, but then she dropped down to 55%. So she's 2 months this has been going on. February 11th, my grandmother called me. It was midnight North Carolina time, which was 10 o'clock Arizona time. And she sounded really good. I was like, Grandma, you sound so good. You sound, you know, she didn't sound short-winded. She sounded like herself. And it made me feel better. And, you know, she asked where the baby was, but I was at work. And we stayed on the phone for 16 minutes. And I remember I got off the phone with her because she kept going like that. And I didn't know if she was coughing or if she was trying to cough or if she was getting short-winded. So I kept saying, Grandma, Grandma, are you okay? Grandma, you need to call the nurse so you can sit your head up more. Grandma, you need to turn on your side because you're putting so much pressure on your lungs. She kept telling me, I'm fine, I'm fine. So I said, Grandma, I'm gonna get off the phone with you and I want you to focus on your breathing. Give me a call. I'm gonna give you 15 minutes. Call me back. She was like, if I could get this darn phone to work. I laughed at Grandma. So 20 minutes passed by. I went on my lunch break. And before I called Grandma back, I called my mother. I shared with my mother something that my grandmother told me about one of the nurses. About the nurse wasn't that friendly. She acted friendly, but she wasn't that friendly, and how she was throwing my grandmother's footsies around in the room because she was upset about something. And so, but my grandma never got her name, so I called my mom to let my mom know. And then I called my grandmother back. I was only on the phone with her for 2 minutes. The nurse, at that time, the nurse was in her room, and the nurse was checking her vital signs, and I guess her stats were low, and the nurse was like, it's probably because you're on the phone. And then during that time, my grandma started doing that thing again, and she was like, and I kept saying, Grandma, are you okay? Are you okay? Because she was scaring me. And she kept telling me I'm fine. I was like, no, you're not, Grandma. And finally, she raised her voice at me. And I knew it took a lot out of her. And she was like, I'm fine. And as much as I wanted to stay on the phone with my grandmother and make sure she was okay, I got off the phone with her because I wanted her to focus on her breathing. So that's what I did. I said, Grandma, I'm gonna let you rest. Don't get on the phone and call nobody else. And she started laughing, and she told the nurse, she knows exactly how I am. I never knew that was going to be the last time that I was able to speak to my grandmother. That morning, I called my mom because my cousin Bree came over with her baby. I finally got to meet the baby. And Grandma's been asking about that baby, asking, when is Bree coming? When is Bree coming? So I was like, Mommy, look at the baby. I was like, I'm about to call Grandma. And that's when she told me Grandma was in ICU. And I was like, well, is she alert and oriented? And she was like, I don't know. I haven't got a phone. I just got a phone call that she was in ICU. I don't know. So the 12th, I get a FaceTime. They have my grandmother sitting up. She has the BiPAP machine on, and her eyes are open. And it made me so happy. And I was like, my grandma is such a fighter. And she was trying to take it off, and my mom was like, no, Mama, put it down. You need that. I was like, Grandma, you have to keep that on. I need you to come home to me. So prior to that, hospital called my mom, and they wanted to know if my mom wanted to put her on the ventilator, or if they were recommending DNR. And that's a conversation that neither one of us had with my grandmother. So my mom was very emotional. But God had already been preparing me for my grandmother's death. So I told my mommy, I said, Mommy, it's time to let her go. And neither one of us wanted to let her go. But at the same time, it's selfish if she's in pain. It's selfish of us to keep her because we want her here. So we decided to make her DNR because we knew that the ventilator wouldn't help. That's how my grandmother died. And so her waking up to ventilator would kill her faster than COVID would. So I talked to my teacher that night. I was really sad, and my teacher told me that the way the hospital put it was like, if we didn't make her DNR, they were going to have to put her on a ventilator. But my teacher told me that was a lie, that they can revive and resuscitate. There was other ways you can do it besides being put on a ventilator. So I called my mom automatically. Mom, take grandma off DNR. Undo it. So rewinding back to the 12th, grandma's eyes were open. She was alert and oriented. We were able to get an advance directive from her. So I said, Mom, ask grandma about being resuscitated. Grandma said no to the ventilator, but she said yes to DNR. Just as soon as grandma said yes to DNR, and her eyes were open, as she was alert and oriented, the next day and the day after that, they sedated my grandmother. Sedated her with Haldol, Ativan. She was already getting morphine for the pain. All three of those suppress your respiratory system. On top of COVID and double pneumonia on your lungs, already suppressant on your respiratory system. I understood the morphine, but the Haldol was not necessary. Ativan, I can understand. But they were saying my grandma was having episodes. She wasn't having episodes. When my grandmother sleeps, she goes into these spells where she's fighting and talking in her sleep. So that's what was going on. And because of that, because they didn't bother to ask her medical history or bother to look, they sedated her. They didn't even want to give her a TPN. They were like, oh, she hasn't eaten for days. You're lying. I just spoke to my grandma. She was just drinking water. She just had ate. Where are you getting your information from? So they're telling my mom, while my mom's in a vulnerable state, hysterical, I have to be strong. We don't recommend the TPN, but there's no point if we just keep her comfort. No, you're not. No. If you can give her a TPN and give her nutrition, if that nutrition is going to make her stronger and get her out of the hospital, give it to her. You're not God. You can't say, oh, she's not going to make it. You're not God. Only God knows the time and the place. So they gave her the TPN. But the DNR was never undone. Instead, they talked my mom into hospice, which I can understand, because if my grandmother would have died in the hospital, she would have died by herself. My mother calls me Sunday. I'm at clinical. And she's telling me she doesn't think I'm going to make it in time. And I'm like, no, I'm going to make it, Mommy. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it for Grandma. I'm going to get Grandma to pull through. And when I leave, Grandma's going to be strong. So, Tuesday comes. And my spirit is really heavy. And that's when I find out that my grandma's being transported to a hospice. And so my spirit's really heavy. My spirit's like, call your grandmother. So I called the hospital Monday night, my time, to have a FaceTime with her, but they never called me back. So I was like, Tuesday morning I woke up and I was really upset, and my friend, she was like, call back one more time. So I called back one more time. I listened to my friend, I listened to my spirit. The nurse called me. About an hour and 45 minutes I stayed on the phone with my grandmother. I sung to her. I read scriptures to her. I talked to her. I builded her up. I let her know I was there with her every step of the way. I bought my ticket that day for Friday. I told Grandma, I'm coming Friday. I'll be there Friday. Give me till Friday. I promise you. I'm gonna bathe you. I'm gonna brush your hair. I'm gonna do everything for you. She got transferred to the hospice without the BiPAP machine. That's what was keeping her going. 2 hours. So I started reading to her because I could see her having a difficult time breathing. I'm like, let me just read to her so I can make her strong. I'm reading to my grandma. I'm reading to her. I'm reading this T.D. Jakes books to her, When Women Pray. I'm reading to her. And I'm reading the chapter to her about the woman that was bleeding for 12 years and when she touched Jesus. And Jesus was like, who touched me? And when I got to the part that said, God help me, my grandmother took her last breath. But she waited till I looked down. And she waited till my mom turned her back. And I heard my mom telling her, wake up. And I'm like, Grandma, wake up. Wake up, Grandma. And Grandma was gone. So, for those of you who like to go out to the clubs, parties, kickbacks, you guys think this is a joke, right? It's not. You can bring that back to your loved one. I still haven't had the chance to process this because I had to be strong for my mom. This hurts. My grandma was my world. She was my heart. She was my everything. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't know God. If I didn't know any better, I would think she was Jesus' sister. COVID is real, y'all. Y'all need to wake up. Y'all really do. Y'all need to be careful. Y'all need to use all the precautions in the world because it's real. I don't know how much more I can stress this because it's finally hit home. It hit home. I never questioned God. But what I do question is these hospitals when it comes to this COVID. We have to fight for our loved ones. Y'all have to fight. Y'all cannot accept everything that these doctors tell you. Fight. Don't let them kill off your loved ones. You fight. Nobody is God. Don't never tell nobody that it's impossible. I don't care how bad off their lungs are. God works miracles, and he worked miracles with my grandmother. She fought so hard. But God was ready for her. And I cannot deny that because he has been speaking to me through scripture. He was preparing me to write my sermon for her funeral and all that. Y'all, it's time for you to open your eyes and realize that God is not playing with us at all. Y'all worried about the wrong things. Oh, I can't wait to go out and have a drink. I can't wait to do this. As soon as the clubs open back up, I'm in there. That should be your last concern. What should be your main concern is falling on your knees and praying to God, because you don't never know the date or the time. You don't never know. It's time for y'all to really wake up and open your eyes, because the things of this world, it doesn't mean anything. It's not worth your life. It's not worth your eternity. Wake up. Again, I thank you guys so much for the condolences. I thank you for the love and support. I love you all. Y'all stay safe.